Good afternoon and welcome to our third and final session with Danny and Nicky Cowley. As we know, the brothers have spanned their career with being PE teachers to football managers to latterly being seen on sort of Football Focus and Sky Sports. The pair we've had three sessions covering leadership. Last week was performance, and today is about sports psychology. The sessions are not about me. I'm going to sort of hand over to Dr. Trish Jackman, who is one of our lecturers on sport and exercise psychology at the University of Lincoln. Please, as ever, ask your questions. Anything that you've got, any questions you have about psychology, sport, to sort of Danny and Nicky themselves, their style of sort of management or the psychology or what they've learned, please ask your questions. But say hi, tell us where you're from, and I will cease there and hand over to you, Trish, to pick up. Good luck, so enjoy.
Good afternoon, and thank you for that welcome, Emma. Good afternoon, Danny and Nicky, and thank you for joining us today. I've been really looking forward to taking part in this talk and having the chance to speak to you, and it's a real pleasure to be hosting the final Lincoln Lens discussion with you today. I'd also like to welcome everyone who's joining us today from wherever you are tuning in from, so please do get in touch during our discussion. We'd really love to hear from you and any questions that you may have on the topics that we discuss. Last week with my colleague, Dr. Sandy Wilmot, Danny and Nicky, you discussed a range of areas that are important for sport performance. One of those was sports psychology, and today we're really going to try and unpack the psychology behind your coaching, your teaching, and your management. And as one of my own main interests in research is the psychology of excellent performance, I'm really intrigued actually to hear your own insights from the field as well here today. So last week, to start us off, I'm just going to cast your mind back to a quote that you spoke about. And you mentioned that in order to improve performance, you have to understand performance. Now, with that in mind, I'd like to start our discussion today by asking you to give us an insight into your perspective on the role of psychology and how it influences your coaching, teaching, and management styles.
Thanks, Trish. Yeah, good question to start. I think for Nicky and I, sports psychology plays a huge part in our day-to-day work with the players. Like you rightly alluded to, the importance of understanding performance for the players is crucial, and we really try to facilitate that and try to get them all into a position where the players actually understand how they perform best. The nature of the working week, there's a lot of focus on the technical, the tactical, and the physical. But for us to try to find opportunities to affect the players psychologically is so important. Normally for us, obviously, if we're on a Saturday week, when the players come back together on the Monday, we will always do a debrief of the previous game. We'll try to take our learning from that game and then move on, which I think is something really important to do, particularly if you've had disappointment. And then really off the back of that, of taking that learning, you're then trying to set the narrative up for the week. So we'll always start with a quote that we think is relevant to the week ahead and the game ahead, and just try to start to tune the players in mentally for the preparations and for what is to come. When we're working with the players, we respect that they're all different and they all have different needs, and also that it's particularly state specific. So sometimes players are more confident in certain moments than others. So it's always to gain a really good understanding of where they're at. I go back to what we've said in previous weeks, that the importance of building the level of respect and building the trust and making sure that the athlete knows that you've got their best interests at heart. And once you've got that, then you can really start to understand them and help them to understand themselves, which is ultimately the most important thing. We use something we call game face. So this is something that we've used more recently, where we talk about the players, and we always ask the players to talk about their best performance and what their best performance looks like and how they felt when they were performing at their best. And we just use just 3 trigger words really, and we just try to get them to sum up what their game face is and try to get that understanding. So they might use words like relentless, determined, full of energy. And it's almost getting them to really be able to feel how they perform at their best. And then literally 5-10 minutes before kickoff, they put that game face on. And also during the game, if the game's not going as well as they would like, then they go back to the game face and they remind themselves of how they perform at their best. And I think this is interesting because what we also do is we talk around when they don't perform so well. And Nicky and I've had lots of conversations around this, but we like them to have an understanding of how they feel when they're playing at their best, how they feel when maybe they're not performing as well as they would like, so that they know they can really feel the difference. And naturally, when they're not performing well, they use words like lethargic, can't quite get there,
leggy.
Leggy is a word. That the players will often say, and it's just really interesting for us to get them to have a really good understanding of how they feel and what state they need to be in to perform at their best. And that's always what we like to do. We've had a couple of players in the past that we try to help. You know, some manage their performance much better than others psychologically. Some need more support in that area, and again, it comes back to understanding and knowing the athletes that you're working with. But we've had boys in our teams that have lacked concentration, got real technical, tactical ability, but are prone to losing concentration in the game. So we will then give them little triggers. So we had one player at Lincoln where it would be pull the socks up. So if he ever felt like he was coming out of the game and he wasn't mindful and in the moment, and he was thinking about maybe what had just happened, maybe a mistake he'd just made, or maybe thinking ahead to the end of the game and the outcome, then it's just that pull your socks up. So he literally would pull his socks up, and it would be a trigger to himself to get himself back in the moment. We had another player, again, this one at Huddersfield. He would be really self-critical, really harsh on himself. And actually what he would do, he'd make a mistake and he wouldn't be able to leave it there. He would carry that mistake and it would actually then impinge and affect his future performance. So when he did make a mistake, we just got to the place where he would pick a piece of grass up and he would just let it go. And it was just his trigger again, just to let that mistake go, get back into the moment and focus on what is coming next. And I think there's a lot of work to do, particularly with young players in terms of getting them to understand their performance and then to manage their performance.
I think as coaches or managers, you can get very caught up sometimes in the bubble of tactics and formations and trying to make gains over your competitors in that way. But a lot of the time, a huge part of the job is about understanding the people that you work with and the individual differences that they will have. And for us, if we're looking at our players and we're judging them technically and tactically, but then also judging them physically and mentally, I think the first mark that Danny or myself would always look to give our team would be on the performance mindset and where that was at, because I don't believe that your technical, tactical or physical skills can shine through unless the mindset of the team is right. And, quite often that's been the first point of discussion when we're maybe reviewing our game plan. Maybe we won't go straight to the tactics, but we'll actually go to the psychology of the performance first. How did we carry ourselves throughout the game? Were we using our game face? Were we using those important words that each individual needs to use to make sure that they deal with the sun shining at times during the performance, or sometimes the thunderstorms as well that can often happen? And very very much so our debrief is around the psychological aspects as much as just the technical and tactical or the physical elements.
Yeah, I think this is this is really true. When you put a game model together, then people naturally think about in possession, out of possession, the transitions, the restarts, and the tactical elements of the game. But there must always be a psychological game plan as well, depending on what the opponent was. I mean, we would have, in our FA Cup run, we would have played Burnley in the FA Cup and then on to Arsenal, and they are they're massive games for the players. You know, games that they're going to remember for the rest of their lives. So you know that they're highly pressured games. You also know that we were a non-league team at the time. We're playing a Premier League team, so you have to make sure that you get the psychology right. And actually, what does success look like? Because you go into the game and the chance of us beating Burnley would have probably been 1 in 500. The chance of us beating Arsenal probably would have been 1 in 1,000. So sometimes you have to set it up accordingly. And certainly, the Burnley game, for example, we talked about climbing the mountain, and what we looked to do in that game was just chunk the game. Such a huge challenge to try to climb a mountain when you're standing at the bottom of it. So it was to break the game down. We actually, by that stage, we broke it down into 6 15-minute games. And the aim was to see how many of the games we could either draw or win, and we actually grew in confidence. And by the time we got to the fifth 15-minute, the players' self-belief had actually grown, and we'd actually said all week that if we could get to the 6th 15-minute, the final 15 minutes of the game, the 75-minute mark, then we could see the top of the mountain. And actually, that we felt that the group were energized through that, and we actually during that week did some training.
Yeah, we actually had a really structured approach to try to translate that from training into the match, particularly against Burnley. So our specific goals were to try to, like Danny says, chunk the game down and get by and through periods of time throughout the match. But that enabled us to have a real intense focus for each block, regardless of disappointments, that we may suffer, because we felt that, potentially against a Premier League outfit, we could concede in one of those blocks. So we thought a lot about coping strategies and how to deal with that, so that then we didn't concede again in the same block. Throughout the week, that enabled us to be able to give the players immediate feedback during training. And it also really took them right to the edge, I guess, of their capabilities. And, I think any elite performer enjoys being taken to that place. And that was really important, that we were able to train in that way in preparation for that match. But, as much as, as we touched upon earlier, it's important to have a game idea or a game model. I believe that it's just important to have a mental model before you go into the game as well. And we spend a lot of time training ourselves physically, technically and tactically, but maybe don't always spend as much time or think about how to train the psychology, in the same amount of detail. And it is so important to optimize or maximize performance.
I'm going to jump in now because we've got a whole host of questions from all over the country, as ever. So I'm going to say hi firstly to Abby. Abby's from North Hertfordshire College, and I think we asked, or you answered one of the questions last week, I noticed on Twitter, from George from that college. So great that the PE teacher there is sort of following us. That's amazing. I'm going to ask the first question really from Katie, because she was brave enough to come in first. So Katie has asked, how do you get players to buy into the psychology of sports performance?
I think first and foremost, when you're trying to get the players to understand what their performance looks like, and I always think if you can work out the whys, and you can work out why you play well, why you win, then you're much more likely to be able to do it consistently and replicate it. So for us with the players, it's trying to get them to understand the whys, how they perform well, and once they start to understand the performance, they actually start to realise how important mindset and their mental state is to performing at their best. We do a lot of work on mindfulness, staying in the moment. It's very easy in sport to get caught up with what's happened previously. It's very easy to get to latter parts of games. You know, you go back to that Burnley game, for example, we would have scored in the 88th minute, Sean Raggett. It would have been easily then for the players to think about the outcome and start to think about the final whistle. And not there's a difference playing to the end or playing for the end. And sometimes players can be guilty of playing for the end. And it's just to stay really mindful and in the moment and affect what you can affect. But certainly, you know, for us, it's important. I think we were lucky enough to have a sports psychologist at Huddersfield who worked regularly. We would use consultants at Lincoln because it's such an important part of performance. And some need more support than others. And it's always for us to understand the individual and to really set up their working week and their training diet to get them to play at their best. So some would have more intervention than others naturally. And also, you know, you get a lot of players that, particularly when, you know, we talk about confidence all the time, don't we? And it's such a fragile commodity. And you know, when the players do feel underconfident, then sometimes they then do go and look for that support. And it's just making sure you've got that support and you know what that looks like. And again, strategies you use just depend on the individual.
I think to get buy-in, you know, ultimately what you need as football managers, coaches, you want results and you want to win matches, because then the players believe that the processes that you're going using, you know, on a day-to-day process throughout the week and preparing for the match actually work. I think for Danny and myself, sometimes our greatest learning has often taken place through bad results and when things haven't quite gone our way. And I guess something that's really important for us is to never react emotionally in those situations, because football can be a very emotional sport, and it can really draw you that way if you're not careful. And I think particularly after a game, we like the next day to be a break for everybody, so we all sort of have an opportunity to reflect on the performances, whether it's been good or bad. That gives Danny and myself a chance to analyse the performance again by watching it back. And quite often when you watch it back, you feel different emotions to what you did, you know, during the live moment of taking the game in. But I can remember, Danny, you know, one of our matches that we had at Lincoln, particularly in the first season against Aldershot at home, where we were disappointed with the performance. Although we got a draw at home, we had a late equaliser. We was actually really frustrated with the performance. And I remember us, you know, taking great learning from that game, and by not being emotional directly after and being overly critical of the players, by just taking that breather and having a day away from each other to then go back in on the Monday, we actually saw the performance as a great challenge to try to turn around rather than seeing it as a threat. It's much better to use language like that for the group. So, you know, this is the challenge now, and what are we going to do about it to actually improve for the future? And once we changed a couple of our ideas, and it was particularly probably a lot of the method around that time was the way that we defended against the ball. Once we'd corrected a few issues that we had, we went on a fantastic run. And as a consequence of that, the players really started to believe in the process that, you know, we were using on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you. I'm just going to, I'm hoping, Zach Manning, that sort of question, that answer that Nicky's given us sort of answered your question a little bit. I'm just going to take one more question now, and then Trish, I'll hand back over to you because we've got lots of questions. So, and I know that some of the answers will be given, but I want to give you all an opportunity to sort of listen to them. So I'm going to take Mark Williamson's question. How do you get the best out of each player? Is it different for all players? And if different, does that relate to varying managerial styles?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, one thing we do when we first come in, we sit down, we speak to all of the players, we start to get to know them, start to get to understand them. We have individual development plans for all of our players, and one of the early parts of that process is just to work out where we can get some quick wins. So how can we make this player better quickly? So is it technically, tactically, physically, mentally? Which area can we target first? And we sit down with the players, and it's actually comes from them normally. It normally comes from the conversations and the way we lead those conversations. The answers and the patterns and the correlations create the answers ultimately. But I look at leadership styles, managerial styles, and I genuinely believe the best leaders are able to come in and out, kind of have all of the different leadership hats, sometimes more autocratic, sometimes more democratic, sometimes more affirmative, whatever it requires at different times, because ultimately football, like all like sport, like I suppose all high performing organisations, can be quite a roller coaster. So to be able to come in and out of leadership styles, and I think and this is the key really, the experienced leader is able to choose the right tool at the right moment. So he selects the right tool for the individual, the right tool for the group. And that only comes through experience, really, living it, and you get to start to feel the temperature and start to feel what is needed for that moment. So certainly, naturally as a leader, you will use certain styles, or you'll be better at certain styles than others, but to keep trying to work on a variety of different styles in order to get the most out of the player. I mean, the other thing is just around this support and challenge. So knowing when to challenge the player, when to challenge the team, or when to maybe come off and provide more support for the player or more support for the team. And this is often, again, closely linked to confidence. When the players are feeling really confident, we believe that's a great time to then really challenge them and really push and squeeze them. Sometimes when they feel less confident, if you then put more additional challenges on them in that moment, then they can almost catastrophize, and you really see a diminish in their performance. So yeah, trying to get the feel is so important.
Another question that we asked them when we first arrived is, what can we actually do for you? What can we do to help you, technically, tactically, physically, mentally? Explaining to them that we're here for you. We want to provide you with as much support as we possibly can. Where do you currently see your game? Tell me about your very best performance. What behaviours did you show in your very best performance that made you feel that you played so well that day? Because that can sometimes give us a great insight into that particular athlete and what their individual behaviours are and trademark behaviours are. I think every player is very different. Some often have more skills than others. I think the players, as Danny's probably already touched on, that have more skill, then it's a case of maybe guiding them more. And then the players that maybe have less skills, then maybe, you're telling them more, and they'll be more of a recipient, I guess, of the information that you're giving. And with always the intention of trying to add to their skill set to get them into a more confident place so that you can guide them, as opposed to just always giving them the answer yourself.
Thank you. Trish, back over to you.
Yeah, so thank you. There have been some really great insights that you've given us so far here today. And I'm going to keep kind of focusing on some of these themes that have been coming through. And I think something that came up last week was the importance of the environments that you try to create when you're working with a group for your players and your staff. And we hear a lot about some of the pressures and the scrutiny that, will be there in top level sport. But from a psychological perspective, how do you go about creating an environment that, on the one hand, will help the athletes to perform, and on the other will also help to protect their well-being as well?
Yeah, good question. I think for us, it's always to try to create a really demanding environment, but always knowing that, making sure the players always know that you've got their best interests at heart. And I think that's the key. Don't start demanding from them, don't start coaching them until they know you've got their best interests at heart. So you've got to get to the relationship to that point. Once you've got it to that point, then sometimes it is actually having a conversation with them, and it's actually saying, look, this is what I see, this is where you're at. To get to the next level, I've got to come after you. But no, for the next 2, 3, 4 weeks, I'm going to be right on you. And if if it gets too much for you at any point, come see me. Come and see me. We'll have another. We'll sit down. We'll have another conversation. We'll look for a different strategy. But sometimes, you know, you have to demand some. You know, the top players, I think, are always self-motivated, aren't they? But you'll get elite players that actually don't have that self-motivation and actually need that. And I think it's always good to understand that. And again, something that we often do, Nicky and I will always go up, we call them effort errors. So if we ever think there's an effort error, then we will go after it, and we'll be quite brutal with our feedback. We try not to be with technical and tactical errors. So for us, you know, we try not to commentate on those errors. Ultimately, the players normally know when they've made those mistakes. They haven't meant to make those mistakes. And certainly, you know, because of the way that we want to play and our game model, that you have to give the players enough freedom to be able to perform and not be afraid to make mistakes. So again, it comes back to that word. I mean, we talk a lot about culture. I prefer to talk about environment because it's much more tangible for me. I can feel that much more, and certainly to try to, you know, an environment where there's responsibility and accountability, but from everybody. Certainly that feeling where the player knows that they can make mistakes. I think it is trying to create that safe environment that the players feel that they can make mistakes, and they're not going to be hung, drawn, and quartered on it. And yeah, it's.
I think these are some of the challenges, Danny, that we face, particularly on a match day, for example, because, you know, there's so many different emotions, and quite often you've got very little time to make the decision as to how you're going to approach a certain situation, particularly when you're addressing the whole team and the whole group. And, you know, you have to decide, right, it's been a poor performance. We're going at halftime. Am I going to hit them with criticism, you know, right between the eyes and be very strong, or am I going to protect their confidence? And I guess what Danny and myself look to do in that moment on our walk into the change, we always have a few minutes to ourselves, just to get an opportunity to, again, emotionally detach ourselves away from the game and from the players. I always kind of try to make sure that there's a member of staff in the change room that just listens to all of the players' comments as they're coming in from the pitch, because I think that's a great way for them, that person that heard that, to feed back to us, just to get a feeling, a perspective of what the players' feelings are. And I think the benefit of Danny and my relationship is that, I guess, we're always looking to have a chemistry where we're bouncing off of each other. So it's unusual for us to both go really heavily on the group in terms of criticism. So if Danny decides that it needs a really strong opinion and strong criticism, then, you know, after he's finished, I might take more of a role of protecting their confidence. And it might sometimes be the other way around. And I guess that sort of, you know, for the player's perspective, is good in the respect that it's not always Danny being the bad cop and it's not always me being the good cop, but we're both comfortable at taking those different approaches. I think in our most recent experience at Huddersfield, it was a fantastic challenge for us, because when we first arrived at the football club, you know, we had 1 point after 8 games and we were suffering at the bottom of the championship. And we had spent most of our time really in our previous managerial experiences being at the top end of divisions when things were thriving and things were in a good place and the group were confident and, you know, there was good relationships everywhere. And, you know, we'd worked hard to promote that and get the direction going in that way. But when we arrived at Huddersfield, there was much more of a feel of isolation. You know, people were maybe had lost a bit of direction and were a bit confused about where the club were going and where the team was at, and probably had a bit of low self-belief, really. And I think that you know, that was a fantastic challenge to arrive at the club and to try to work so hard to try to turn that around and create a culture where everyone felt confident and knew the method. And yeah, I guess that we needed to explain to the group that just because we've arrived, not everything's going to be perfect and rosy from now on. We're still going to suffer stressful situations, but how we're going to cope with those situations as a group and how we're going to deal with those as a team of people and how we're going to work together to make sure that we, you know, keep working purposefully throughout the week and keep on trying to work really hard to get ourselves out of the situation that we're in. And we're actually delighted really with the fact that we're able to avoid relegation and give the club some stability.
It was a great challenge actually, because like Nicky alluded to, when we come into Huddersfield, we had a group, and there wasn't in our previous clubs we'd always been able to find a psychology for the whole group, whereas at Huddersfield, naturally when things are not going when things are going well, everybody wants to be a part of it, and everybody wants to align themselves to that organisation. The flip side of human beings, when things are not going so well, everyone wants to distance themselves from that organisation. So we had to work really hard to try to bring a togetherness, to bring up some joined up thinking and one team thinking really. And when we first arrived, if we're honest, we had a group of individuals who had deep care and had actually been really negatively affected by the recent experiences, because obviously it wasn't just that last season, the season before, I think when we arrived, they'd only won once in 38 games. So you can imagine how difficult that was. And we had a group of players that had a real deep care, and then we had another group that didn't care, that distanced themselves from where the club was at. And it was about trying to find a way of working. And actually, we would often go in and we couldn't. In the early part of our tenure at Huddersfield, it was hard to find one psychological message each week for the group, and we had to really work really hard with the individuals to try to bring it together. And actually, initially, it was about finding the right psychological message for the different groups that we had within the group, if you like, and slowly but surely bring it together. But it was like Nicky alluded to, it was a great challenge, and for us, we took so much learning from that.
Yeah. Sorry, Trish. I was going to just jump in and take a couple more questions from the audience, because they're all over the country. We've got Stevenage fans and Lincoln fans and all sorts of people sort of watching today. So I'm going to just take on the back of what you've just said, Danny. And Nicky, the Nick Walker question, which is how do you as a pair handle pressure and expectations from fans and players alike, which I think is quite a key. We've talked a lot about how you motivate and the psychology of the players, but I just thought that's quite a good question.
Yeah, I think for Nicky and I, because of the journey that we've had, it's been quite gradual and quite progressive, because obviously in our early days at Concord Rangers, we would have been in tier 9 of football, and there would have been certainly less public exposure, less opinion. As you go through the divisions, the bigger clubs have more support, have more opinions and more voices. I think first and foremost, no one could put more pressure on Nicky and I than ourselves, and that's a good place to be. There's a lot of internal pressure, so almost the external pressure becomes irrelevant, because the amount of the demand that you put on yourselves. Nick, you say good things to the players, don't you, around social media, because social media, whether we like it or not, has such a big part to play in the world, and it can have such an influence on the way that we think, and certainly the way our players think.
Yeah, it's it's in the media a lot at the moment, isn't it? Particularly with the way that people are using the platforms, and they're coming under some criticism as well with what's allowed to be posted. And yeah, quite often, our players will, I often, of course, observe their behaviours all the time. And, they go immediately to their phone to check social media, or if we're staying away in hotels preparing for games, they'll be on their phones a lot on using social media platforms. And yeah, just the education that we try to give. And, I don't know how helpful this is for them, but I hope it is just to try to remember that, write down the 4 or 5 people that are really important in your life, and the people that understand the journey and the difficulties that you've been through to get to this place. So once you've done that, they're obviously the people that are so important to you. Why would you then choose to listen to people you don't know, that don't really have any sort of context on the actual struggles or situations that you're going through on a daily basis? And it needs much more education than just that those comments. But I think it's very, very important now, particularly for not just footballers but everybody in society, that we find a way of making sure that we can, hopefully the government will help control media platforms much better in the future, because some of the things that do get wrote on these platforms are just very difficult for people to digest and hear, and it can have such a huge impact on people's mental health and their performance on a daily basis at work. And it seems to me that the football industry, it almost gives people a free rein to behave however they want and to say what they want. And I'm not sure if that's quite the society that we should want to live in this day and age.
I think going back to Nick's question, for Nicky and I, and it's probably a boring answer really, but the harder we work Monday to Friday, the more detail that we do, the more organised we are, the better learning hits that we've provided for the players, both on the pitch and off the pitch. Almost by doing that and by working really methodically and intensely and intelligently, you get to match day and you almost take the pressure off yourself, because you ultimately wake up on match day knowing you couldn't have done any more, and that quite a cathartic feeling actually, and that's quite
I've got to be honest as well, Dan, is real pressure to me was maybe as a teacher, when I had to wake up in the morning and I had a morning practice, 5 lessons, break time, lunchtime, parents' evening, then training at the end of it. So I really so grateful for my teaching career, because I feel that gave me some fantastic skills and it gave me an opportunity just to practice harnessing my coaching skills, which I continue to do now. You teach thousands and thousands of lessons, and you're involved with the school that we worked in, Danny, it was a secondary school, and there's over 1,500 students there, and so many different personalities, and thinking about how to get the best work into all of the people that you worked with, and connecting with so many different people, pupils, staff alike, played such a big role, and how to deal with situations on the spot as well, and thinking very quickly and being able to adapt. We are all really important skills to have, and I'm very grateful for the background that we had.
Fabulous. Can I just take one last question before you sort of move into Trish? If we've got time, Cameron, Felix, Louis, I will get to your questions, but I know we are sort of running short of time. Just Alicia, I think we will move to your question because I think that's sort of Trish's final question. But just one last question from George Butler, who is currently our first year sport and exercise student at the University of Lincoln. Do you think there is a gradual increase in prominence of sports psychologists within professional football clubs? And I think you alluded to this bit with Huddersfield. So good question.
Yes, I do. I think we, as we get to understand performance more and more, I think we see the importance of mindset and the psychology in order to perform at your best. The brain is such an important organ, isn't it? And historically, we've trained the limbs and we've trained the heart and the lungs, but we've never trained the brain, and that is so crazy when it all starts from here. So yeah, I think we will. I think then the key is to get the sports psychologists to work with the managers and have that kind of alignment, and I think that's what is very, very important. Sometimes managers, I heard Alex Ferguson talk about this actually. Steve McLaren, who was the assistant manager to Alex Ferguson at the time, brought in Bill Beswick to come in and work with the Man United players. And I think Sir Alex was really nervous about Bill coming in and speaking to the players because he was frightened that there might be mixed messages. And what Bill did at the time, and this was great. He knew that Sir Alex would be the only person in the training ground at 7 o'clock in the morning. So he got in at 7 o'clock in the morning. He'd already created a presentation, but he asked Sir Alex to look through the presentation, tell him what he liked, tell him where he felt he could add to it. And it almost, once Sir Alex had had his 20 to 30 minute input, when Bill then went to leave, Sir Alex introduced him to the group and felt really confident that the message was going to be a consistent one. So I do think that they're going to be really important. I think how we use all of the different provisions in and around the first team to support performance is crucial, and that joined up thinking again is very important.
I think in our time, Danny, at Huddersfield and Lincoln, we've often, had conversations with sports psychologists, haven't we, to think about how we can get that edge on our competitors. And in my mind, I'm always thinking, like, right, this is where we're currently at, but we're say we get into the car and that the sat nav says we're going there, and we know where the flag is, we're heading towards it. Sometimes on that journey, you can just go down little side roads that you didn't need to go down, go off route and off piece. And sometimes that conversation where you're using somebody who can listen to what you're feeling and what your emotions are can help put you back on the right route again. And yeah, absolutely, supporting coaches, managers, players, absolutely agree that they play a fundamental part of any sort of elite performance environment.
Thank you. Back over to you, Trish.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think it's great to hear about the growth in sports psychology and its use. That's fantastic. During the week, I got a lovely message from David, who's an Imps fan, and wants to let you know about what it meant to his father, who will be 96 in April. So following the club over the past few years, he said it has been a major part of his life and has been instrumental in him maintaining a positive outlook. And he also said that the momentum you created and the success you and the team achieved clearly had a significant effect on his father's well-being. And he just wanted to thank you for making a real difference. And I think that touches on the last point I wanted to discuss today, which is around mental health. And I know in recent years you've been advocates for mental health, and you've spoken up about it. And I'd just like you to talk a little bit about some of the work that you've done and any key messages that you would have that you would like to share with people.
Yeah, so I'm lucky enough to be an ambassador for the Mind charity, and yeah, no, we've made giant strides in recent years, haven't we, in terms of mental health, and now people are much more willing to speak about mental health and speak about their emotions and the way they're feeling. I go back just 10 years, and in an elite, high-performing environment, players would never show that vulnerability. They would never be willing to share that vulnerability with other people, and as a consequence, they would keep it within. They would internalize it, and then the problem would manifest and become bigger and bigger. So, just the opportunity to talk. For Nicky and I, we genuinely care about the people that we work with, whether it be staff members, whether it be players, and to have that open door policy. I always say I wish I had all the answers. Unfortunately, I don't, but I do care, and I'll do anything I can to help you. And I think sometimes for Nicky and I, we have a real willingness to want to help. We're also respectful enough to know that this is actually not our profession. We're not specialists in this area. Sometimes we can help and support. Sometimes then making sure that you've got the right, you're able to pass it up the ladder or to the right person that can actually provide the professional support that person needs. But you'd be amazed at the amount of players that suffer it. Sometimes people think about sportsmen and elite footballers and put them on this pedestal and don't think that they have the same problems as every other human being, but they do. And certainly, for us to try to support them in that is so important. And I do think that it's great that we are now talking more as a society. We're much more willing to show vulnerability and express how we're feeling. I still think we've got a long way to go. But no, it's great that people are now reaching out, and it's an area that particularly in the world that we're living in at the moment, it's been such a tough year, hasn't it? We're nearly 12 months with this pandemic. and it's had such a huge effect on all of our lives. And I think, one thing Nicky and I are quite good at is always trying to see the best, trying to be positive. And you have two choices in life. You either see the worst in people or you see the best in people. And I always encourage, a really positive environment and for everybody to see the best in one another. It's easy, isn't it, to see the worst in others, but you live a much, much better life if you can see the best in others, that's for sure.
Absolutely brilliant. And a fantastic sort of comment to end on, I think. Another quote that we can probably pinch, Trish, I think. You'll be up in lights, Danny. I just want to sort of wrap up this sort of series. I've sort of enjoyed these immensely, and I feel very privileged to be sort of part of all three of these sessions with you. So thank you so much. I've learned an awful lot of insight into football, leadership and psychology, I think even I will take away. So I hope that everybody watching has as well. We've been delighted to have you here. So thank you so much as part of the University of Lincoln to be part of that. And we are delighted that you are part of that with us and our sort of journey. I hope that people watching can sort of look and think, actually, psychology, leadership or sport and exercise science is somewhere where I would like to sort of take my career, and sort of hope that these series has sort of given you that opportunity to think how many opportunities there are in any of those fields of career. So I would like to just sort of wrap up and sort of say thank you. And finally, sort of good luck to your sort of future career. There's a few comments in there sort of wanting you in Ipswich and all over the country, I think. But wherever your journey takes you, I'm absolutely certain that whoever sort of, wherever it is, they will be, absolutely delighted to have you. So thank you, Trish, for sort of organising today as well. And I just want to say good luck to everybody. Thank you.
Yeah, Matt. Thank you, Trish. Thank you.
Just on behalf of Nicky and I, it's such a fantastic university, and certainly we wouldn't have achieved what we did at Lincoln without your unbelievable support and the lecturers and the way that they allowed us to steal your best third-year students at the time. And you look at Lincoln and what it's gone on to achieve. A lot of the people working at that football club have links with the university. So, from Nicky and I, and certainly from Lincoln City, I'm sure, we're so appreciative of all the support you provided us. And it's been great to come back and just to speak to people about the way we work.
Thank you so much. And we hope to hear more from you. We would love to invite you back again. So thank you.
Pleasure.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.